Let's begin our journey into the science of coffee. Right now, approximately 2.25 billion cups of coffee are being consumed around the world today. It is the second most traded commodity on Earth after oil. And the people drinking it, most of them, have been told two completely contradictory things about what it is doing to their bodies. That it is harmful, that it is protective, that it dehydrates you, that it does not, that it damages the heart, that it protects the heart, that it causes anxiety, that it sharpens cognition, that it is addictive, that it is one of the most studied health protective substances ever identified. Here is the truth. All of these statements are simultaneously correct and incorrect, depending on one variable almost nobody talks about: time. What coffee does to your body in the first week is not what it does in the first month. What it does in the first month is not what it does in the first year. The research on coffee is vast, often contradictory at the surface, and perfectly coherent once you organize it by timeline. Today, I am going to give you that timeline, week by week, because the transformation your body undergoes in response to daily coffee consumption is one of the most documented and most misunderstood stories in nutritional science. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what your daily cup is doing to you, and whether what it is doing is what you think it is. Before we start the clock, you need to understand the basic mechanism, because everything that follows depends on knowing what caffeine is actually doing inside your cells. Now let's explore the biological mechanism inside our cells. Caffeine is a xanthine alkaloid. Its primary mechanism of action is competitive antagonism at adenosine receptors, specifically the A1 and A2A subtypes, found throughout the brain and peripheral nervous system. These receptors are the key to understanding caffeine tolerance. Adenosine is a nucleoside that accumulates in the brain during waking hours as a byproduct of neural activity. The longer you are awake, the more adenosine builds up, binding to its receptors and producing the progressive sensation of sleepiness, what sleep scientists call sleep pressure. Caffeine does not provide energy. It does not generate neural activity. It blocks the receptors that would tell your brain it is tired. The fatigue is still there, chemically speaking. The signal announcing it has been silenced. This distinction matters enormously for understanding the week-by-week story. Because the brain does not passively accept having its adenosine receptors blocked, it responds. A 2013 study published in the Journal of Caffeine Research confirmed that the primary mechanism of caffeine tolerance involves upregulation of adenosine receptor density. When caffeine chronically blocks adenosine receptors, the brain responds by manufacturing more of them. More receptors mean more adenosine binding capacity. More adenosine binding capacity means that the same amount of caffeine, blocking the same number of receptors, now leaves a greater proportion unblocked and capable of producing the fatigue signal. The stimulant effect diminishes. The dependency deepens. This is the engine driving everything that follows. Week 1. If you have never consumed caffeine regularly and you begin drinking coffee daily in week 1, the effects are at their most dramatic. The stimulant peak marks the beginning of the biological journey. The adenosine receptor upregulation has not yet begun. Your receptor density is at baseline. Caffeine is blocking a high proportion of the receptors available, and the dopaminergic and noradrenergic systems, freed from adenosine's inhibitory influence, are responding at full amplitude. Dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens increases. Norepinephrine in the prefrontal cortex rises. Heart rate accelerates. Blood pressure elevates transiently. A 2012 meta-analysis in the Journal of Hypertension found that acute caffeine consumption raises systolic blood pressure. Cortisol, which follows a natural morning peak and decline, is amplified by caffeine when consumed within the first hour after waking. A phenomenon documented in a 1994 study in psychosomatic medicine showing that caffeine potentiates the cortisol awakening response by up to 30% in caffeine-naive subjects. Cognitive performance in week 1 is genuinely improved for most people. Reaction time shortens. Working memory capacity expands. Sustained attention improves. A 2010 review in psychopharmacology confirmed robust improvements in vigilance, reaction time, and executive function in caffeine-naive subjects during the first week of regular consumption. These improvements are real. They are also largely temporary, because the brain is already beginning to adapt. By day 4 or 5 of week 1, the adenosine receptor upregulation is underway. The dramatic stimulant effect of the first cups begins to plateau. The person who felt genuinely alert and focused on day 1 now feels approximately normal. The baseline has shifted upward. The transition from day 1 to day 5 is the transition from pharmacological effect to pharmacological dependency, and most people make that transition without noticing it. Week 2 and week 3. By the second and third weeks, the adenosine receptor upregulation is substantially complete for most regular caffeine consumers. As we move into weeks 2 and 3, the brain fully adapts. What this means in practical terms is that the stimulant effect of caffeine has shifted from genuine cognitive enhancement to maintenance of baseline function. You are no longer drinking coffee to feel better than normal, you are drinking it to feel normal. Without it, the excess adenosine receptors produced during adaptation bind adenosine rapidly and efficiently, producing a fatigue and discomfort signal that is more intense than the pre-coffee baseline. This is caffeine withdrawal. A 2004 review in Psychopharmacology, covering 57 experimental studies of caffeine withdrawal, confirmed a consistent syndrome: headache, fatigue, decreased alertness, depressed mood, difficulty concentrating, and in some cases nausea. The headache, often described as a dull, bilateral pressure headache, is caused by cerebrovascular vasodilation. Caffeine causes cerebral vasoconstriction as a secondary effect. The mechanism of the headache is deeply rooted in blood flow. When caffeine is absent and adenosine receptors are no longer blocked, the vasodilatory effect of adenosine is amplified by the upregulated receptor density. During weeks 2 and 3, something positive is also happening that is less often discussed. The liver's cytochrome P4501A2 enzyme system, which metabolizes caffeine, is upregulating. Your caffeine metabolism is becoming more efficient. A 2016 study in Nutrients confirmed that regular coffee consumers metabolize caffeine significantly faster than non-consumers. This means the caffeine clears your system faster, which has implications for sleep quality and for the timing of your last cup. Week 4. The end of the first month marks the point where the acute pharmacological story of caffeine tolerance is largely complete, and the longer-term health story begins to emerge. By week 4, the focus shifts to long-term health protection. The cardiovascular adaptation that began with the blood pressure elevations of week 1 has largely resolved. A 2012 meta-analysis found that habitual coffee consumption is not associated with sustained blood pressure elevation. The acute pressor effect of caffeine diminishes as tolerance develops, and the non-caffeine components of coffee, polyphenols, chlorogenic acids, diterpenes, begin to exert their own cardiovascular effects. Chlorogenic acids, the primary polyphenols in coffee, inhibit glucose 6-phosphatase and reduce postprandial blood glucose response. A 2011 study found that regular coffee consumption was associated with improved insulin sensitivity, with the effect appearing after approximately 4 weeks of regular consumption. This is the first glimpse of the long-term metabolic protection that the epidemiological literature on coffee consistently documents: significantly reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. Your gut microbiome is restructuring. A 2019 study found that coffee consumption significantly altered gut microbiota composition, increasing the abundance of bifidobacterium species, bacteria associated with intestinal barrier integrity and reduced systemic inflammation. The fiber content of coffee, approximately 1.5 grams per cup of soluble dietary fiber in the form of coffee melanoidins, is prebiotically active and selectively feeds these beneficial species. Week 8 and beyond. 2 months of daily coffee consumption. The body has fully adapted pharmacologically. The stimulant effect operates as a maintenance mechanism. Beyond 2 months, coffee becomes a silent guardian of health. And the longer-term health data begins to paint one of the most consistently positive pictures in nutritional epidemiology. The cardiovascular literature is striking. A 2014 meta-analysis covering over 1.2 million participants found that habitual consumption of 3 to 5 cups per day was associated with a 15% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. The U-shaped relationship has been replicated across multiple large cohorts. The neuroprotective data is equally remarkable. A 2010 review found habitual coffee consumption associated with a 32% lower risk of Parkinson's disease in men. The mechanism involves caffeine's antagonism of A2A receptors in the basal ganglia, reducing excitotoxic glutamate release that contributes to dopaminergic neuron loss. A 2009 study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that midlife coffee consumption of 3 to 5 cups per day was associated with a 65% lower risk of Alzheimer's disease in a cohort followed over 21 years. The mechanism involves caffeine's ability to reduce amyloid beta production and promote glymphatic clearance, as well as the anti-inflammatory effects of polyphenols. The liver data is perhaps the most robustly documented association in the entire coffee literature. A 2017 systematic review in the BMJ, covering 201 meta-analyses, found coffee consumption associated with the largest risk reductions for liver cirrhosis, liver cancer, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease of any dietary factor ever studied. 2 or more cups per day was associated with a 44% lower risk of liver cirrhosis. Here is what the full week-by-week picture looks like when you stand back from it. Week 1. Dramatic stimulant effect, blood pressure elevation, cortisol amplification. Week 2 and 3. Tolerance established, withdrawal emerges between doses, liver metabolism accelerates, caffeine now maintains baseline rather than enhancing above it. Week 4. Cardiovascular adaptation complete, insulin sensitivity improving, gut microbiome restructuring. Week 8 and beyond, the pharmacological story has stabilized, and the long-term protective story accumulates. The most important thing this timeline reveals is that the coffee most people drink for its stimulant effect has by week 2 stopped providing that effect in any meaningful net sense. What it provides instead is prevention of withdrawal. The genuine long-term benefits, cardiovascular, neurological, liver protection, operate completely independently of whether you feel alert. You may have been drinking coffee for years because it makes you feel awake. It stopped making you feel more awake than baseline approximately 10 to 14 days after you started. What it has been doing since is something far more interesting, and far more worth continuing for. Subscribe to the channel because next week we are going deeper into what the substances you consume every day are doing to your biology, and I will see you there.